Well, if you're here, it means you didn't OD, jump off a cliff, or drive your car off a bridge after the 49ers got their asses kicked on a Thursday night, yet again, by the Seattle Seahawks. I'm AJ Bellino, minus Diego DeBarco, who basically thought the 49ers sucked so bad, he went to Peru. In any case, we're going to go through some questions from you, the viewers, talk a little bit about what we see happen with the 49ers, what we think can change, and basically where we think the team goes from here. First question that we have comes from Alec in Modesto. The question is, who's at fault for the loss last week, and who do the 49ers lean on going forward? First things first, let's talk about fault. There's plenty of blame to go around. There are a lot of people who are going to do a lot of yammering about Colin Kaepernick being the sole reason the 49ers suck. I want to squelch that, because that's not necessarily true. Cap is not playing great football. That can't be denied. However, it's really critical to point out that Cap's success is highly dependent on 5 guys. Those 5 guys are the right tackle, right guard, center, left guard, and left tackle. And to this point in the season, the 49ers have the worst center, the worst right guard, and the worst right tackle in the game of football. I'm going to say the game of football because I really think that there are probably some middle schoolers out there who are outperforming Marcus Martin, Jordan Devey, and Eric Pierce. And it's really important to address the fact that these 3 guys are basically at the forefront of what the 49ers wanted to get done this season. Employing his own blocking scheme, making sure that cutback lanes are there for your running back, Carlos Hyde, making sure that Kaepernick is upright, which he isn't. So when you ask who's to blame, in my estimation, it starts at right tackle, it stops at center. That's your root cause. It's affecting Kaepernick's play. So in my estimation, I think that you've got to start with the O-line. Now, as far as who do we lean on going forward, that's a great question. And that question would be Carlos Hyde in almost every conceivable scenario, except for the one where he has a stress fracture in his foot. If he can't cut, he cannot be the linchpin, which means that instead this football team, which is going to score some points, has to lean on its defense. The best player on that unit right now, well, his name is Lynch. He's an outside linebacker, and the guy can bring it. He might be the only 49er that had a good game against Seattle. I don't know how the defense is going to help this team win games other than holding opponents to less than 10 points, because this 49er football team scores about 14 a game. So I hope that lends some clarity, Alec. Thanks very much for the question. And our next question comes from Diego in Peru. Will benching Colin Kaepernick help energize the 49ers? I'm going to go ahead and disagree with Jerry Rice, Hall of Fame wide receiver, that benching Colin Kaepernick is going to somehow energize his football team. No, it's not. It would energize the football team if Joe Montana from 1984 happened to get in there under center and get something done, or maybe if 1993 Steve Young stepped to the fore. But that's not who we've got. We've got Blaine Gabbert. And outside of my Xbox, after about 4 or 5 years of hardcore development, Blaine Gabbert is not the guy to energize a football team. I'm sure he's a wonderful person, but let's face it, the body of work just isn't there. This is a guy who is a backup in the NFL for a reason. You don't start a backup on a team that needs continuity. You just don't. Okay, so question number 3 is a 3-parter. Comes from Corey in San Clemente. The first part of the question, who or what is to blame for the 49ers' seeming lack of preparation? Assign a percentage of blame for the relative shittiness of the 49er offense, and is Colin Kaepernick going to be a 49er next season? I'm going to hit this one in order because I think that the progression is going to work here. So, first things first, the 49ers' lack of preparation. I don't think that the 49ers aren't prepared to play football. I think that they're prepared. I just don't think that their preparation is translating into results on the football field. So at the end of the day, what you see is a prepared football team that's gone through a game plan that makes sense. You just have players in the field that can't execute it. And I'm going to circle back to my last answer. Piers, Devy, Martin. All three of those guys hurt my soul. They just do. They can't get it done on the field, and when the offensive line does not work, nothing else you have planned, on offense at least, is going to work. So if you want percentage of blame, right now, I'm not lobbing bombs at Jeep Christ. I'm not cursing out Trent Baalke. I'm not really even crucifying Jed York for this. I'm going to go right for the O-line coach, Forster. I mean, this is the guy, the position coach, who's going to tell his OC who he thinks needs to roll out there. This is a guy largely responsible for putting this offensive line together and teaching it to block. And the sad truth is that outside of Joe Staley, Alex Boone really can't be forgiven for shitty play either. He's not getting it done. Joe Staley is the sole star performer on that unit. Everybody else has largely struggled. So if you want my percentage of blame, I'm going to give maybe 75% of it to the O-line coach. He's got to get these guys keeping their quarterback upright and opening lanes for running backs. And if that doesn't happen, this team's not going to gain any yards and they're not going to score any points. Now, as that flows to Colin Kaepernick, is Colin Kaepernick going to be a 49er next season? That's a great question. And I think the answer to that question is yes. And here's why. Colin Kaepernick succeeded early in his career because he had a veteran teach him to play the game of football. That veteran was Alex Smith. He did an admirable job of basically being a quarterback coach for Colin Kaepernick when he stepped into the game as a wide-eyed second-year player. So, in my estimation, Cap is around, even if the 49ers draft a quarterback. What I think will be really telling is how long Cap will be around. Do they draft a tackle? Do they draft a guard? Do they draft a center? Do they draft two guards, two tackles? Who knows? That's really going to be your hint. If they go out and invest heavy in the offensive line, in my estimation, that means they're banking on Cap for the long term. So our next question comes from Tommy in San Ramon. And the question has to do with the 49er defensive scheme that Mangini has put together. The question is, it doesn't look like this defensive scheme fits players drafted by Baalke for the previous coaching administration. And so the question is, what changes? Do we draft different players? Do the 49ers adapt the defense to the players they have? And, the question is, it's a complicated one, and the answer is a complicated one. I don't think that Mangini's scheme doesn't fit the players on the roster. I think it does. Mangini's defensive scheme is sound. It makes perfect sense. And I'm sure there are a bunch of you out there shaking your heads right now saying, well, then how come they can't stop anybody? How come they're ranked 31st overall in defense? The answer to that question has a lot to do with the defense that these guys used to play in. Vic Fangio's defense had very, very, very simple assignments, had very, very simple pressure packages, had very, very simple coverage rules. The 49ers almost always went with a two shell. For the lay people out there, that's two safeties deep, either in man or in zone. And the Mangini defense doesn't do that. Coverages change, and they change based on what formation of personnel the other team brings out on the field. Mangini's scheme relies a lot more heavily on zone than man coverage. And that creates very, very interesting quandary for defenders who aren't used to having to account for additional rushers. Vic Fangio didn't blitz very much. He was able to get pressure with 4, maybe 5 guys. And this defense isn't doing that. Now, Mangini will bring extra rushers. That will happen. You're going to get blitzers from the outside. You're going to get blitzers from the inside, linebackers, DBs, extra DBs. You're going to run stunts up front. And all of that is designed to create pressure on the quarterback. The reason why this defense is struggling is because the only 2 people who consistently get pressure in this defense, who are in the starting front 7, are you've got Lynch, who's bringing it like no other. I mean, Aaron Lynch is making it happen. And to a lesser extent, you have Ahmad Brooks. Brooks has 3 sacks. Lynch has 5. Lynch also has a boatload of pressures. He's among the best in the NFC at pressuring the QB. The downside is that our front 3, namely Dial, Williams, and Dorsey, are the least effective 3-4 linemen at generating pressure on the quarterback in the NFL. What that does is it puts stress on zones that are being covered by 1 defender instead of 2. When you blitz a linebacker and the other linebacker is expected to pick up the slack in a soft zone, and that blitz doesn't generate pressure, all you've done is create a hole in your defense for the offense to exploit. That's what's happening to the 49ers right now. So the fix isn't to change the scheme or get new players. The fix is to find a way to generate pressure with the players they have. Our last question comes from Peter in Sacramento. The question is, why is Jed York such a bitch? I don't know what to tell you, Peter. I presume that you're talking about York not stepping to the plate and holding himself accountable for the latest 49er loss. After he mutually parted ways with Jim Harbaugh, there was the statement, I want you to hold me accountable if this team doesn't compete for Super Bowls. After this last loss, I think it's a safe assumption the 49ers aren't competing for the Super Bowl this year. So why didn't Jed York step to the fore? I have a logical answer for that one. After he sent out his tweet last season, after the Thanksgiving Day debacle, he was roundly criticized for it. And I'm going to give him a little bit of credit. Not a lot of credit. This is not a guy who I think is doing a stellar job. However, biting his tongue and allowing there to be one voice representing the team isn't necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it makes him a better owner, and I don't think that it in any way excuses him for the mistakes he's made over the past year. However, I do think that at this juncture, York stepping out and talking about what's ailing this franchise is probably the last thing we need. He's not a popular guy right now. So trying to step up and offer excuses to a fan base that was in the Super Bowl 3 years ago isn't really going to do much to allay any of the criticism he's receiving. And I don't think it's going to do a whole lot for the fan base. Well, all right, it's prediction time. The 49ers are heading to the St. Louis Rams this weekend. You're looking at a 10 a.m. kick, so an early start, East Coast-ish. I'm not picking the 49ers to win this football game. The Rams are favored by 8.5, and while I don't know if the Rams are going to win by 8.5 points, their offense is not much to talk about either. They're actually, I want to say they're ranked 30th in the NFL. Defensively, however, is a completely different story. that Ram defense might pose more problems for the 49ers than the Seahawks defense did. They have got a really, really good front seven. So good that I'm not sure the 49ers are going to be able to run the football against them. And if that doesn't happen and they're able to pin their ears back and rush Colin Kaepernick with aplomb, I don't see how the 49ers get within sniffing distance on this one. This might end up being a 10-6 football game. This might end up being a 13-10 football game, provided the 49ers can move the football. I just don't think that the Ram offense is going to make as much noise as Vegas does. So I pick the 49ers to cover. I don't pick them to win. My final score on this one, I'm going to say Rams 17, 49ers 10.